Merry holidays, friends, to you and yours. And welcome to yet another edition, a pre-holiday edition, a can I order something online and still get it delivered somewhere by Tuesday evening edition of Thinking Out Loud. My name is Andrew Siciliano. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're not suffering from too much pre-holiday anxiety. Hanukkah as well begins, I believe, on Tuesday night because it's awesome when everything overlaps. Just love it. Don't you? I do. I also love that it's week 16 and there are 3 more weeks left in the NFL's regular season. And down the stretch, we come with really no clear picture in the NFC, but a fairly clear picture now in the American Football Conference as to who is getting in, and not really sure as to who everyone's going to play, but we kind of sort of know who is going to get in. Sorry, Cincinnati Bengals, I don't think you're going to get in. Regardless, we'll get to all those seedings and clinching scenarios and machinations, or is it machinations? I've heard it both ways, coming up shortly. A happy pre-holiday greeting to my good friend Sam Batesh. How are you, sir?
Excellent. And of all the sort of leap year, interesting things that happen on a calendar, I think you hit it on the head. The Hanukkah Christmas intersection, which very, very rarely happens on the same day, which is what's going to happen this year as far as first night of Hanukkah, Christmas Eve, all of that. So yes, it is truly a wish you a happy holiday for everyone that they're actually coinciding. So that's adorable. And yes, of all the scenarios that are going to happen, I will say, and I know we're going to get into this, the Cincinnati thing is still, if you start looking at the schedules, the Broncos schedule is interesting. That's all I'll say. The Broncos, it's kind of interesting.
It ain't gonna happen. It just ain't gonna happen.
Could happen.
No.
And I mean, the win out
Passover, we're here also would be happy holiday, but that would be an entirely different thing. Yes, before we get to the games that interest us coming up this weekend, let's quickly tap the base, as we like to say in the biz, on the game on Thursday evening. A game in which Denver came out and punched the Chargers in the mouth early, marched down the field, asserted their will, and at the end, after a lot of nonsense, it was the Chargers who came out on top. Larry David was there. That's all that mattered about the game. That was it. And that other crazy lady Charger fan that sits, lower deck in the suites and waves her arms and always gets on TV. Also, from that game, the fact that with the Charger win, there is a now interesting series of events that could happen that could, by Sunday evening, lock up the entire AFC field. And just for historical context, that would happen with 2 weeks left in the regular season. Now, of course, obviously the season's expanded. It's a 17-game, 18-week season. But never since the merger being 1970, never since the merger have we ever had an entire conference wrapped up with 2 weeks left before the end of the regular season. And with the Broncos losing and the Chargers winning on Thursday, there's now a 3-team parlay in place that could do that on Sunday. Bear with me here. If the Colts lose, if the Dolphins lose, and yes, if Sam's Bengals lose, without the other Sam Hubbard, he's been ruled out. Without DJ Sheldon Rankins, he's been ruled out as well on the defensive line. But if all three of those things happen, again, Indy loses, Miami loses, and Cincinnati loses, that means that both the Broncos and the Chargers are in, despite the outcome. LA beat Denver on Thursday. That means they're both in. Baltimore's in, and we know the 7 teams in the AFC. Now, things could change. Seeding could change. Buffalo could get the number 1. Kansas City could fall to number 2. All things could happen. The Ravens could win the division, and the Steelers can fall back to a wild card. All these things could happen. But if the Bengals lose, the Colts lose, and the Dolphins lose on Sunday, then we have the 7 teams locked in, and they are the 7 teams right there on the left of your screen. And that has never happened this early. We'd be done before Christmas in the American Football Conference. Everything left is now just the final 2 weeks, rearranging the chairs and who goes where and who gets a bye. And that's kind of silly And it also, and think about this, I say it's never happened since 1970. It used to be a smaller playoff field. Now we've expanded the playoff field, and we would actually get this done with a 7-team playoff field, which is just bonkers. Now, the NFC, there's all kinds of stuff, Sam, that is still out there. But in the AFC, and I think there's a legit chance of it happening. I know people want to laugh at me. It could happen.
Could happen. Could absolutely happen. I mean, absolutely the 3 games that now that are pending, this sort of the Miami, Indy, and Denver thing. I just wanted to say for those that are rooting for the Bengals, it's more interesting than it seems when you say it out loud. When you look at it on paper, it's actually a little more feasible for those that want to go down that path. Only because Denver, more on the Denver side than the Cincy side, maybe, is just the idea that Denver is going to have a head-to-head with Cincinnati. Now, of course, Cincinnati would have to win this week to even, as you mentioned, give it a shot. But if that were to happen, the idea that Denver and Cincy play each other, and then Denver has a Chiefs game on the schedule, so that makes it interesting. Of course, Cincy has Baltimore as well. But
the Chiefs may also not have
to
play in that game because they may not have a shot to get to that one seed. They might be locked in at 2, and they could sit everyone down. That could be a Carson Wentz Chiefs game.
It could, which we were worried about this week as well. But the Cincy thing, just because of the head-to-head, it just feels interesting. But of course, I mean, look, the Browns could end it all this week with that in regards to Cincinnati, and that would then be that and fascinating. And I'm actually rooting. I'm actually, yes, I think Cincy's an interesting playoff team, but the history that you said, if it could happen before Christmas, wow, what a gift for all of us to have it wrapped up.
Myles Garrett about the Browns winning Sunday in Cincinnati in the Battle of Ohio said on Friday, "Misery loves company. I'd like to give them some misery. Also, all I want for Christmas is a win." And Grant Delpit on Thursday asked, "What are you playing for? Our season's over. I want to bring them with us." What's driving you? Again, a question to Grant Delpit on Thursday. "It's the NFL. I worked my whole life to get here. I ain't going to the playoffs, so you ain't going either." Good answer. For those who say, "Oh, no team cares about spoiling another team. You want to play spoiler?" Most teams will say, "No, we're worried about ourselves. We just want to win." Browns are like, "Yeah, to hell with them. Let's take them down." Now, one thing to say it, another thing to do it, but without lingering too much on that game, the Bengals have lost 4 times this year when they've allowed 30 points. In their losses, they're averaging 28 points scored, 27.7, something like that. So again, in the games that they've lost, they are averaging 27.7 offensive points. That is just absurd. They have the number 31 scoring defense in the NFL. It's DTR in that game. Yeah, it could be crazy. I mean, it could just be crazy back and forth. Why not? It could be a one-sided game. I have no idea. But regardless, yes, the Bengals have a plan, but they need a lot of things to fall into place, including get a win first against the Browns in the Battle of Ohio. And one quick thought on that as well, because the Browns tweeted out a comment I made on my Bark Tank podcast. Check it out on clevelandbrowns.com and any Cleveland Browns affiliated podcast platform, wherever the Browns YouTubes as well. I, at the end of my show this week, said, thought experiment, what is Skyline chili? It's nauseating. I wouldn't feed it to a dog. DAWG or DOG. And the Browns tweeted that. Nothing wrong with that. Like, I own it. I say it. But yeah, I got an idea. Let's just take spaghetti and throw it over horrible, soggy noodles and then put cheddar cheese on top.
Have you ever had this dish? Which again,
will not eat it.
Okay, I mean, it's advertised everywhere. Is it now? What's the worst part for you? And I wish I had the photo, and I don't have it right here. Is it the mound? Okay, the mound, the cheddar cheese,
all of it.
The pile on top is so
cheddar cheese on top of soggy noodles.
It's spaghetti too. I had a girlfriend once who enjoyed cheddar cheese instead of Parmesan in her pasta, which we can discuss.
Don't put cheese on pasta, but I could live with some grated Parmesan if need be. Yes. That's it.
But cheddar is a whole nother story. And are we saying that, Skyline chili is akin to bolognese in that dish in a way, right? It's sort of it's become.
It's not akin to anything other than something that should be put in a bowl on the floor. It's really not. Come on. Stop it.
I now feel like that should be, we should have set something up that would be the loser's dish. It's some sort of challenge for you and I that then we would have had to eat.
Challenge, because I would not ever eat it.
You just would never even. It's
may as well serve it with a jar of mayonnaise. I mean, you have the same likelihood of me eating it.
That's all right. One other thought I just wanted for Thursday night. I just thought the Josh Palmer catch for the 20 seconds that we say it was. We've had a lot of catch of the year. I just wanted to show it one more time that batting that fastball to yourself and catching it and getting your toes down is it was impressive.
It was a great catch. Not to one up it, I would argue that the touchdown preceding that 2-point conversion was actually a better play by Herbert than this was by Palmer, but they were both great plays.
Yeah, it was special in the moment. That was that.
Also special, the Week 16 Sunday lineup. And the Saturday lineup as well. So as we put the 5 games, it means something to us on the screen. We're actually going to begin with the Saturday games because, and for those who don't know, there are multiple games on Christmas this week or next week, this year. 2 games on Christmas. Christmas is on a Wednesday. Santa's coming down the chimney Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. So there are 2 games on Wednesday. Football on Wednesday? Are you kidding me? No, I'm not.
It happened in 2020, right? We did get a Wednesday night football. Right. Steelers game.
But that was a COVID game. Yeah. The reason they're doing this, or the way that they're doing this, is by taking the 4 teams that are playing on Christmas Day and making those 4 teams play in 2 games on Saturday. So it's a short week this week. It's a Saturday game. Okay, we could deal with that. And then it's the same turnaround to Wednesday as you would in a traditional week have Sunday to Thursday. So, for example, the Chargers and Broncos both played Sunday, and then they played Thursday this week. Well, now you're going to have these teams play Saturday and then turn around and play Wednesday. And that's how the league is justifying it, saying it's the same turnaround, and we're only doing it with these 4 teams, and this is what you're getting. So the Saturday games are as follows: Houston, Kansas City, and Pittsburgh, Baltimore. And then those 4 teams switch sides, and then you get Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore, Houston on Christmas. We'll get to those games next week. Let's do the Saturday games this week first, and let's start with the Texans and the Chiefs, because this is one of those playoff previews. Not exactly a playoff preview necessarily, because they would not be playing each other right now, but they could potentially meet in the postseason in the divisional round, hypothetically here. This is the Texans at 9-5, the Chiefs at 13-1. This is the 4 seed visiting the 1 seed. All right. The Chiefs can wrap up home field advantage if they win and the Bills lose to the Patriots. That ain't going to happen. At least not both of them are going to happen, because the Bills are not going to lose to the Patriots, who they play again, by the way, Week 18. But the Chiefs team that I saw last week, Sam, in Cleveland, they beat the Browns, to their credit, 21-7, was less than impressive. Defensively, they played well. They forced 6 turnovers. There was another turnover on downs. Actually, there were 7 turnovers in that game. But offensively, man, this is a slow team. Other than Xavier Worthy, who had a 21-yard touchdown, officially called a run. Sorry if you have Mahomes as your quarterback. You lost a touchdown pass. He can run. Nobody else can run. Travis Kelce can't run like he used to. Juju Smith-Schuster can't run like he used to. DeAndre Hopkins, like Travis Kelce, has that old man game, but he can't run. He just can't. This is a slow, plodding team that cannot protect its quarterback. Mahomes is going to play. He has no injury designation. At this point, if he didn't play Saturday, it would actually be an NFL investigation and a scandal, because he has no official injury designation for the game. So he's good. He's going to play. He's clearly hobbled, but here's why he is hobbled. Not just the high-low with Mike Hall last week that truly injured him at the end of the game, but listen to these numbers. Patrick Mahomes has been hit 102 times this year.
Oof.
102. Now, that's second most in his career, but only 4 off his all-time high, and we still have 3 games to go. His all-time high was 2018, which was his first career, or his first year as a starter. In his last 3 games, he has taken at least 11 hits in each of the last 3 games. 30, 5 times Patrick Mahomes has been hit since week 13. Okay? That is not sustainable. And this week, he's facing Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, and they're the only pair of teammates in the NFL that have 10 sacks each. There are a lot of good rush tandems around the league, but this is the only rush tandem in the league where both have double digits. Danielle Hunter, the former Viking, Will Anderson, the former top 5 pick a year ago. These guys are going to get after Patrick Mahomes. They kicked Joe Thuney out last week, the left tackle. He played well against Myles Garrett, held him sackless. However, he had a lot of help. You're always putting a back or a tight end over on that side, save for maybe 1 or 2 rushes. This is going to be a problem. And honestly, I think the Texans are going to win this game. Now, Steve Spagnuolo is going to light up CJ Stroud. Light him up. And I don't know how many points the Chiefs, or rather the Texans, are going to score. But I think the window is open for the Bills to steal the number 1 seed in the AFC, because Sam, I think the Texans are taking the Chiefs down.
That would make everything more exciting. I root for the Chiefs to win every week. I think a stronger Chiefs team makes for a more interesting upset if it were to happen in the playoffs. And that just seems more fun and interesting. I also see a scenario where the Chiefs would be the 1 seed and could not win a playoff game. A lot of people, see that. In other words, they would be in the divisional round, but they would not then win a game. Although I just don't see the Chiefs in the playoffs losing to any of these 3 teams. I'll say them: Houston, Denver, Chargers. I just don't think Broncos, Chargers, or Texans would line up and beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. Doesn't seem likely to me. I also find this game interesting for that reason. The Chiefs play 2 teams here before the end of the season that they could very likely face in that divisional round: Houston and Pittsburgh. This is interesting. Obviously, Baltimore was week 1, so it was a long way away. But now it's kind of interesting. Would there be anything to the idea that you're not showing the opponent something in these games? Obviously, you need to lot, right? I mean, for Houston, there's very little to play for in a sense. Locked up the division. There's very little there. And what are you showing Kansas City when you'd much rather beat them in a month than right now, or in 3 weeks than right now?
D'Amico Ryans ain't playing possum.
But would you want to? Would you want your coach to play possum in that way? Hold something back, knowing that this could be your opponent. All of a sudden now it feels divisional in the idea that you could very well face the Chiefs and then need something in your back pocket that you don't want to show.
You could also get to the 3 seed. It's a possibility.
But even in that, how much does that make a difference? I mean, with the 1 seed being, I understand you could end up hosting one more game that you could host. You're going to want that. But in regards to opponents, it means very little.
It means hosting another game. I mean, you answered it yourself.
It could. Yes, it very well could. And of course, we understand that. And we play to win the game, all of that. But I'm just putting it in the back of our minds here that it's interesting that Houston and Pittsburgh both have the Chiefs here. And I just see that as, okay, you're very likely going to see them again. I see a healthy Patrick Mahomes winning this game. Healthy. I mean, we know he's not completely healthy with the way he came off the field, but Chiefs at home, another close one, another one that's going to look like they should win and could win. And how did they not lose this game? Find a way. And Houston, because of locking up the division, again, I understand the difference between 3 and 4, but the Chiefs,
I can't believe you don't think there's a difference.
But not just
it's
because
ridiculous.
of it's not as significant. It is not nearly as significant as the 1 seed is.
If you don't think the momentum of beating the Chiefs in their own building, actually, that if you don't think that would mean something to a young team that hasn't done anything, and been playing middling football.
And by the way,
it
think
means
about this. Okay, and think about this, just for more fuel to your fire now on this one. The Texans would be the AFC team that has beaten both the Bills and the Chiefs.
Again,
so that would, obviously,
and the way the Texans defense has played of late with all their picks, what's the number here? They have 11 picks over their last 5 games. They had 3 last week. Yeah.
And what you said about Hunter and Anderson, one other thing to point out about the Chiefs in regards to their offense and being slow, as you said, and maybe not as impressive.
They're getting Hollywood Brown back.
They're the number one third down offense in football,
but they were bad last week.
Yeah, true. But it is significant. I mean, that is the sign of a strong offense. Obviously, what you're doing on third down to stay on the field, that's massive. And as you said, Hollywood Brown. Isn't it funny that there were no weapons for Mahomes a year ago, and now you're talking about Juju, Hollywood, DeAndre, Xavier, and Travis Kelce? That's much different list.
Only two of those people can run. Like, I cannot tell you how slow that team is. They are a plodding team. Plodding.
But all of a sudden,
and it wasn't just the wet field. So yes, Hollywood changes that. But last week they had one guy that can move. One. That's it. I mean, Kareem Hunt, Isaiah Pacheco ain't known for their speed.
No, not at all. Not at all. But again, Worthy obviously is that game changer in regards to speed. And DeAndre, I mean, you're the one that said the separation on DeAndre was not impressive.
Separation? There is no separation.
I see this collection, though, as more of a collection since it's the best collection since Tyreek left. There you go.
Fine. Look at the schedules here, and for those who don't realize, the Chiefs are 13-1. We'll just lay it out for you. The Bills are 11-3, but Buffalo beat Kansas City head to head. So for Buffalo to get home field, they have to win out, and they will, because they go Patriots, Jets, Patriots. They are going to win out and go 14-3. Write it down. Period. And then they would have to have the Chiefs go 1-2 for Buffalo to get home field. I'm telling you there's a chance, because the Chiefs' schedule is Houston, at Pittsburgh on Christmas, and then at Denver. Now, that at Denver game, they may not have to play anybody. Broncos may not have to play anybody. There may be a scenario, in all likelihood, the Broncos are in by that point, where 7 or 6 means something. That game is going to come down to, looking ahead to week 18, who has to go to the 1 seed, and is that 1 seed Buffalo or Kansas City? If the Chiefs lose this game and then lose on Christmas, they have to play that game to win week 18. Have to, assuming Buffalo wins these next 2 against the Patriots and the Jets, which they will. So it's interesting. Let's put it that way. Now, normally, Sam, we would go around in semicircle and counterclockwise there. But because the other game is a Saturday game, top right corner, let's do that one. So we got, for people listening and not watching, this makes no sense. We have the Steelers and the Ravens here. The game is in Baltimore. That is the late game at 4:30 Eastern time on Saturday. All right. So the other Saturday game for teams lining up to play on Christmas. The 5 seed, the Steelers, the 3 seed, the Ravens. Pittsburgh can wrap up the AFC North, and they haven't won it since 2000, the COVID year, if they beat the Ravens in Baltimore. Remember, they beat them week 11 in Pittsburgh, 18-16. There was a 2-point conversion attempt at the end and all of that nonsense. The Ravens also have a path in this week. They're in with a win, or if the Colts and the Dolphins both lose, then Baltimore can get in. The Steelers have owned this of late. Owned them. They've beaten them 5 straight. Not all with Lamar, but they've beaten them 5 straight. But with Lamar, big picture here, Lamar is 1-4 against the Steelers, if you want to look at quarterback wins and losses as an actual quarterback stat. 1-4. And in those 4, the Ravens average 19 points a game. Lamar has 5 touchdowns in 5 games. 5 touchdowns in 5 games. And he has 11 giveaways. So he averages 1 touchdown total passing and running and 2 giveaways. Simply put, the Steelers have Lamar Jackson's number, because the numbers tell you this. And if you go back to week 11, the game in Pittsburgh, the Ravens gave it away 3 times. Justin Tucker missed 2 field goals. The Ravens were penalized a dozen times. And if they play that way, then the Steelers win the division on Saturday. I don't think they do play that way. I think you're going to get the Ravens' best game of the year, not because they finally cut Deontay Johnson on Friday. That was a long time coming. But because they know this has to be their best game of the year. You can get into the playoffs without winning. You likely could and will this week, regardless of whether or not you win. But if you want to win the division, you got to win this game, period, full stop. And I believe in John Harbaugh in getting this team ready to win this game. The Steelers did not look good last week. They had, 3 possessions the entire second half? They had the ball. The time of possession was 40-20 in that game. They had it for 20 minutes. That is it. That was their lowest time of possession in 21 years. And they couldn't get Jalen Hurts off the field in the second half, and they couldn't stop the run. So if they don't stop the Ravens running the football, Ravens are winning this game. And the Ravens are keeping it interesting, Sam, the last 2 weeks for the AFC North title.
I love that. And for those that aren't watching Hard Knocks AFC North, this is prime Hard Knocks. Mm-hmm. This is as I mean, Andrew, your voice has made it on Hard Knocks, by the way. Congratulations. That was adorable. But you know it well. You've grown up living and breathing it. Not that HBO needs our help here, but if you're not watching Hard Knocks, whatever you've thought of Hard Knocks in the past, any moment with Mike Tomlin, I consider something worth taking a look at. It's amazing how you can read a Mike Tomlin quote and hear his voice, isn't it? You can read it on paper. I'm saying you can read a quote from Tomlin, right? You read something and by the words used and the order in which he places, his cadence comes through so clearly. He's just so unique in that way. But these teams are also fascinating and I love it. And this, let's say it, rivalries in sports. Let's not go college, but rivalries in professional sports. This one is in the conversation. Steelers Ravens is in the conversation for best. Simply, and when it comes to NFL, I would say of recency, this is the best.
What if I told you it's not really a rivalry when one team always wins?
Yes, although what about this though? The team that wins the game head to head so often. But when you look at the division and winning the division, these two teams traded quite a lot.
Sure.
These two teams of late trade that, and that ultimately is the real true test because of what it means for the playoffs, et cetera. But you're right. The Lamar 1-4 thing, you laid out all the numbers. You really just can't ignore that. But for the number one offense in football, this feels like, obviously, forget about it's a game need to have for the division and all of that. It just, the way these two teams have stacked up this season, it feels like this was going to be a split. The idea that one team would sweep the other just seems so ridiculous. And obviously that's what Pittsburgh has a chance to do here. But the no Pickens piece, I'm not going to say that makes it impossible. This team has won without Pickens, of course. It does limit their possibilities of coming back in a game in which they fall behind. And we saw that in the game against the Eagles. It was difficult. Obviously, what the Eagles did in the second half, again, 2 possessions for the Steelers in the second half, that seems impossible. I mean, to watch the Eagles get the ball with 10.5 to go and for the Steelers never to touch it again was just mind-boggling. But that was
it's deflating.
It, of course. And you would imagine they're watching, then the way Tomlin is, they're watching that tape with, we're not going to let that happen. And what's interesting also about it is that Barkley, it was arguably Saquon's least impactful game from a numbers standpoint. He was hit hard by Minka Fitzpatrick, had to come out for the entire second quarter and only had 65 yards in that game. But you would imagine that Tomlin is saying Derrick Henry is not going to run us out of this game. We're not going to let that happen. And obviously they beat him once. The 2-point conversion, yes, could have gone another way. And Boswell, of course, in that game, all of the Steelers points in that game were field goals. It was all Boswell. So in many ways, the kicking, the Tucker versus Boswell thing.
That's what they were doing in September.
Yeah. It's I just, like you, I have a feeling this is going to come down to it. I'd rather it come down to it. Hard Knocks or not, I just think the AFC North deserves not to be wrapped up this early.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And the idea that there is still a chance of the AFC North getting 3 teams in is mind-boggling. The idea that the AFC West would have 3 teams in instead, also kind of mind-boggling. But that's where we stand here as we head into week 16. Those games are Saturday. Let's go to the Sunday games. And Sam, let's get to Eagles and Commanders. Why not? Because obviously it's an easy transition. The Eagles are the 2 seed right now. The Commanders are the 7 seed. This is the leader in the NFC East against the number 2 seed, or the number 2 team in the NFC East. And this would be a playoff preview. The difference is it's in Washington at that, I don't want to call it a dump of a stadium, but it is officially now the worst stadium in the NFL, bar none. They know it there. They're trying to get a new one. Obviously, hopefully back to the RFK site, which I drove by in week 5, all boarded up. It looks right out of a post-apocalyptic movie these days. Hopefully you could move back into that one and get out of FedEx one of these days. But this would be the playoff game in wildcard weekend, except in the different venue. The game would be in Philadelphia if we were playing this in 3 weeks, as opposed to what it is on this week and this Sunday, where it's in Washington. The Eagles can wrap up. They're already in the playoffs. They can wrap up the NFC East with a victory. They've beaten the Commanders 6 out of 7. And as you've been pointing out the entire time, the Lions, all banged up as they are, still do, for now, hold the conference tiebreaker over the Eagles. 8-1 as compared to 7-2. I have one guarantee for this game. I guarantee you that heading into the second quarter, the Commanders will have the lead. Absolutely, unequivocally guarantee you. Because they have not been, the Commanders have not been outscored in the first quarter for 12 consecutive games. So in other words, they have not headed into the second quarter trailing in 12 consecutive games. The Eagles, Sam, as you've been hitting over the head for weeks now, if not months, have gone 16 consecutive games, 4 months. 4 months. Without, actually 4 months going back to last year, without an opening drive touchdown.
That's just
so guarantee you, or your money back, and you pay nothing for this podcast, the Commanders will lead heading into the second quarter.
I don't even understand what's happening with the Eagles in regards to the first quarter. In fact, the game against Pittsburgh was arguably their best first quarter of the season. And then they got points. They got a field goal on the opening drive, and it was looking good, headed in that direction. But that was a game in which they also tried to give the Steelers every opportunity. Remember the 2 turnovers, and Andrew, you pointed out last week the turnovers were going to play a factor. We both had said it, and it clearly did. But in the end, it was the Steelers that the Eagles took advantage of, as opposed to the Steelers taking advantage of the 2 early turnovers, the Hurts fumble and then the muffed punt by DeJean. That could have been the game. That really could have been the game. And then there was a penalty that moved the Steelers back, etc. Enough about that. You're so right. The Eagles do not start well. They just don't start well. I'm not sure what it is about the first quarter, but offensively, it is not right. And Washington starts fast. One other thing to point out. Do you remember, let's go back in the time machine, when Jaden Daniels was not only the offensive rookie of the year in a runaway, but even potentially the MVP?
I never thought he was the MVP. You did. But yes, I do remember those times.
But again, in a conversation about it and what he was doing for that Washington franchise, and you growing up in that area pointed out so much how the belief in what this Washington team is doing is predicated so much on what obviously Quinn and Daniels have done. But there was that lull. Remember, Daniels started, there's no quarterback ever who has started a career with a better completion percentage than Jaden Daniels. And in fact, I think it was through 4 weeks, he had the greatest completion percentage of all time. Nobody had ever done that for 4 games. Nobody.
That's why they play 17.
And then it dropped considerably, right? I think it was, as you're pointing out, I think the last 4 games, no, I'm sorry. The last 2 games, he's been back up to 80%. But before that, there were 4 straight games where it was at 60%. So it had dropped. He had leveled off. He was likely injured. You pointed out after the Thursday night game against the Eagles, he didn't look the same. He wasn't quite the same quarterback. They weren't quite the same team because of that. And maybe they are getting that juice back. Although remember, a 2-point conversion failed by the Saints in an epic comeback last week nearly could have given them a loss. Commanders looked great in building a lead and really suspect defensively in the back half of that game, letting Spencer Rattler nearly come back and beat them. For a game, obviously, the Saints need. They're in a playoff race as well here. They are technically still alive, but that was suspect. Somebody you pointed out as being a crucial piece of this Washington team, Lattimore. Lattimore did play his first game. He was not targeted once. Lattimore has made an impact, and he'll make an impact on this game right about the time the Eagles are feeling good about their pass game, because they did pass the ball well to both AJ and Devontae against the Steelers. Lattimore is going to be a huge difference in this game for Washington. And this was obviously the Rams game is the stamp of Saquon, unlike any other game this season, with the 255 rushing, the 302 total yards. But it was that Washington Thursday nighter where he completely took over the second half, certainly the fourth quarter. Saquon was the difference. And you mentioned the Eagles won't have a lead at the end of one in this game. They were trailing at the end of two. They were trailing deep into the third quarter. They were even trailing momentarily in the fourth quarter of that game. Lopsided how the score turned out, but this will be close for those that are just assuming the Eagles and the Vikings and the Lions. It's all going to come down to that week 18. Eagles could be out of the conversation for the 1 seed here. I mean, a loss puts them very much because they're not going to hold the tie. The Eagles are not going to hold the tiebreaker over the Lions, and it even comes down to a surgical difference with what it would be with Minnesota if they finish all with 2 wins there. Obviously, we know the Lions and the Vikings cannot both finish with 2 losses because they play each other week 18. But wow, this feels like an opportunity for the Commanders to make a statement. But then again, as I mentioned about Houston, how much is the seeding going to matter? Obviously, Washington wants to clinch, but I'll say the Eagles. I never say it, but I'll say the Eagles get their T-shirts.
Two things to point out here. Number one, congratulations to friend of the program, Bobby Wagner, who is going to play in his 200th career regular season game. In this one, he's over 200 if you include like a dozen, 15, 16 playoff games in his career, but 200 career regular season games for a guy who's going to get consideration for Canton. Tip of the cap to one Bobby Wagner. And Saquon, everyone's looking at the rushing total. Can he get to Eric Dickerson's 2105? He is on pace on a 17-game pace to be just underneath it at 2050. I love you, Saquon. You got to do it in 16 games. This isn't a Ruth Maris thing where you're talking 154 to 162. It's a 1-game difference. I'm sorry. You got to get to 2105 in 16 games. And I don't think that is going to happen. If you get the record in 17, it's still an amazing accomplishment, man. Good for you. I'm happy for you. But Eric Dickerson, also friend of the program, and this is not a personal me defending him. It doesn't count if you don't do it in the same amount of games.
Actually,
I'm sorry. It doesn't count.
I should be on the other side of that. Just
there is no other side.
Based on the amount of Philly gear that's behind me, I should be on the other side of that. I'm actually going to agree with you when it comes to history and when it comes to those unbreakable records, which Dickerson's feels unbreakable. The greatest cheat code is handing somebody another game to try to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that exactly. is unfair, of course. Yes. Also, though, if Saquon were to do it, of course, that would be incredible, but amazing. Worthy of all the things that don't need an asterisk. And I don't take away championships for COVID seasons or what. All of that's ridiculous. But an asterisk in regards to how many games, that would matter. I think it is well worth pointing out, of course, because of how long it has stood and because what it meant for Dickerson. And the only thing it would say is maybe the running back is back to being, we've said that position has sort of taken a step back, but if he were to do it, that is certainly something. I'll also say this. What risk do you run? I mean, the Eagles are playing for a Super Bowl, not for this record. Even
there's
Saquon,
no, you don't.
Yeah, you just don't. You can't. And frankly, he was banged up last week. Like this could be a lot less. I don't necessarily think we're going to go into week 18 with a chance at him doing that.
Winning a title like this is an amazing accomplishment, and it would almost be like the Lakers hanging an in-season tournament champion banner, like whatever this Emirates Cup thing was they did in Vegas last weekend, where they were giving tickets away, whatever that was.
Congrats to the Bucks, yes. Okay.
Yeah, the Bucks won.
I believe.
They I'm excited.
They were in it. Bucks, yeah, there you go. Yeah, good for
you. All within the Browns, Bucks, Columbus Crew family. Yay, Bucks! I honestly didn't know that. Just saying that years from now,
I'll send you the T-shirt.
The NBA. You remember the Larry O'Brien above all else? Go Bucks!
And you would have sworn Emirates was for a soccer title anyway. So,
yeah, you would. All right, 2 more games to get to. Let's get to the Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks. That is a Sunday game that is in Seattle, where Sam reminded me the Seahawks are 3-5 at home this year. Not good in any way, shape, or form. Overall standings wise, if you want to look at that, with these two teams. Hold on. Where'd my standings go? I have way too many tabs open.
You can even look at the
screen.
No,
here it is. Like. Here it is. All right. So we got the Vikings as the 5 seed right now, and the Seahawks on the outside looking in as the 8 seed. Look, there are a couple of interesting storylines here. Obviously, Geno Smith's health. He didn't want to complain about the officiating. There was no flag thrown, and he was hit low last week. He was trying to leave his feet and throw the football. The Seahawks are a really interesting team, and remember, they have the Week 18 game on the road in Los Angeles against the Rams, who hopefully don't blow it and lose this week on the road at the Jets. And Aaron Rodgers, who, well, okay, that would be another show with the stuff he said this week. Oh, wow. Either way, the Vikings right now are in as a wild card. It's a hell of a long shot for the Vikings to get to the 1 seed, but they have a better shot than the Packers right now, certainly, even though the Packers are right with them. They're 10-4. They're 2 games back. The Sam Darnold future conversation doesn't maybe factor here on Sunday, but it is the most interesting thing for me about the Minnesota Vikings. And I said it back in September when Sam came out of the gates playing well. Will the Vikings regret drafting J.J. McCarthy? I think the answer is still going to be no, because if they decide to pay Sam and move on from JJ, they have a very, very, very valuable trade piece if they ever got there. And I don't think they will get there. But Sam, if this Sam Darnold goes into Seattle, lights up the Seahawks, and they take another step closer, and maybe the Lions stumble down the stretch to getting to the top of the NFC North and then winning in the postseason, with Kirk Cousins finally being benched and Michael Penix taking over and all the offseason quarterback moves that we could possibly see, I am here for Sam Darnold staying hot, playing MVP caliber. He's not going to win football, and making March that much more chaotic.
The fascinating part of this game, and what you just said is great for Darnold, and there's not a better, I mean, is this one of those, it's interesting, you actually were the one that pointed out, comeback player of the year. Is Darnold up for comeback player of the year?
I don't think he should be. What did he come back from?
Well, that was the conversation, right? That we now want to make
this
it
year
more
they
about
kind of want to make it an injury thing.
Exactly. Instead of I stunk one year or I was irrelevant and then now I'm something again, right? When Geno, it's pretty much the difference between, when Geno had won it, I believe that was really where the argument was. That
right. I don't think it's just to make that point again. I've said it before. I love Geno. Love him. Enjoyed every interview I've ever had with him. I love watching him play football. He's a heck of a quarterback. But when he won comeback player of the year, I said, what did he come back from?
From himself.
From mediocrity, or from not really playing great football and being behind Russell Wilson? He was a former 2nd-round pick who, look, you could write a book. There probably will be a book one day about how everything went with the Giants. They were winning, the fight in the locker room, and then the whole thing in New York, the other New York team with Eli being benched and Geno taking over for one game and the coach getting fired and all that. It's a great story, but what did he come back from? Normally you're talking about a comeback player like Nick Chubb, for example.
Chubb would be up for it. Chubb would have absolutely, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
that's clearly a comeback player of the year. And for people that want to go, well, what about Joe Flacco? He didn't deserve to win. It should have been DeMar Hamlin. I think Joe and Geno are very similar. Both great stories. I'm all for giving them awards. Don't know if that's the best award to give them, not to take away from their accomplishments. But yes, that's how I feel about Geno.
I love Geno Smith also and everything that he had done. And I agree with in regards to the comeback player of the year, that it's just a different conversation. Darnold's just in that Baker Mayfield where not going to be the MVP, but worthy of that conversation right outside of it because of what he's done this season. Seahawks at home. You just said it. And you've talked about what that venue is and has been. Something's up, something's different, something is strange and bizarre there. It's not the same thing. And as you mentioned, since 2009, hadn't had a losing record at home. And that looks like what it's going to be. The fact that that's just not what it used to be there. This feels like Minnesota establishing themselves. You mentioned that Minnesota maybe doesn't have that path, but of all the paths to the 1 seed, you've said it many times, the Lions injuries are just, is that eventually going to rear its head? Vikings, essentially for the 1 seed, it's in sight. I mean, yeah, it is very much in sight. And of course, it's a brutal path because it's Seahawks, Packers, and Lions, but it is there. I mean,
if they're 15-2,
they're going to be, by the way, and if they are 15-2, they're the 1 seed. I believe that it has something to do with, I think, whether the Falcons or Rams finish with more wins, what the tiebreak will be between the Eagles and the Vikings, if they both end up with 2 losses. But it's still, the Vikings have right now the upper hand, even if it did come down to that tiebreak. And with the head against Detroit, that'll be theirs. I will point out this. If they both finish with 3 losses in regards to Vikings and Lions, the Lions still have the tiebreak. So I believe, in other words, if the Vikings do lose a game here before that Week 18 game, that game could not mean what we think it does. Just so you know, they would end up with the same record, but Detroit would still have the tiebreak in that scenario.
Let me throw one more thing at you. 3-way ties are officiated differently than 2-way ties.
Correct.
3-way ties, where 2 of the 3 are divisional foes,
break that tie first,
are officiated differently than 3-way ties between 3 teams in 3 different divisions.
Correct.
So there are a lot of variables here.
There are,
understanding that they play each other too, which factors.
But simply this, the divisional tiebreak there is going to fall to Detroit based on who the opponents are in the division. Correct. And again, they would have the loss against Minnesota. That's right. They would have the loss against Minnesota. That's what it would come down to. But regardless, Lions still have that upper hand in all of those, both divisional and even conference.
Lions could lose to the Bears.
That's the issue, of course, if they lose a game based on the injuries, etc. Something's up with Seattle. That game against Green Bay was just not competitive, and it felt like, playoff atmosphere and something was going to happen. I so want for that game Week 18 to matter between the Seahawks and the Rams, and for that to be the division, et cetera. And it still could mean very much for Seattle to get in. I think Seattle's losing momentum because they're just not at that level. I don't think they're at the level here with Minnesota, Green Bay, even call it the Rams for that matter. And they had a chance. They should have beaten the Rams, you could argue, but the Rams to come back in that game was incredible, and what a catch in overtime, etc. And Gino with a key turnover at the end of that game to even let the Rams back in it. But Seahawks are just, that was ugly, and they're not playing well, and it feels like Minnesota. Also, what's fascinating about the Vikings is it's not necessarily each week that Jefferson is so outstanding, Justin Jefferson. What defenses are actually doing is keying in on Jefferson, and he's not having that impact. It's not like Jefferson's having wow games every single week. Opening it up, though, for Addison, for Hawkinson, and for Aaron Jones. That if you really watch a Vikings game, that's actually what's happening. It's not going to Jefferson. The defense is so keyed on Jefferson, and then you've got Addison, Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones, and that's the beauty of Darnold. Darnold understands that, and he is finding and checking to the right play, and more often the case than not, he is doing that, and that's been absolutely key for them.
I'm a big Sam Darnold fan. You want to go back to 2018, one of the Browns to take him. They took Baker Mayfield. Worked out well at first, and Baker certainly has built himself a nice career, and happy for him. It's worked out for Sam Darnold as well. I didn't necessarily want Josh Allen. Full disclosure, Sam, don't clip this and put this on social. Didn't want him. Didn't want him. Loved what I saw at the Senior Bowl. We had him at the Senior Bowl for NFL Network. Thought the guy was great. Enjoyed speaking to him as well. But I, living here in Southern California as you do, having watched Sam Darnold, right? Remember, like, for example, the great back and forth against Penn State at the Rose Bowl. Like, I wanted Sam Darnold. Didn't mean I thought less of Baker, nor Josh Allen, nor Lamar Jackson, nor even Josh Rosen for that matter. That guy could spin the football.
Do you remember that conversation? Yeah. That draft, we're going to look at that. I mean, this one day there'll be a documentary about that draft as well. That draft class is pretty fascinating, especially because what you're going to get. I mean, you could have likely two Hall of Fame careers out of that draft in regards to the 2 guys picked right at the end of that or further down.
7
exactly. And 32. So the fact that you've got Josh Allen, and so Rosen came after Allen, but the fact that it was Allen and Lamar, that those are going to be the careers we talk about. And then it was Baker 1, but the conversation so much, especially because we were in Southern California probably, but that Darnold and Rosen conversation was a heated one. And there was the piece that came out in Sports Illustrated. Yeah. Rosen was the conversation. There was a moment in time when Rosen was going to be number 1. That's what's so interesting, is that's the forgotten guy there. But that draft class is so interesting, especially the way 2 of the guys are rewriting their careers in this moment. Darnold
Absolutely.
and Baker both rewriting their careers.
Speaking of guys rewriting their careers, let's go to the other game that interests us. And you may say, why on earth, if you were only picking, if you're only picking 5 games, why on earth are you picking the Jaguars visiting the Raiders in Las Vegas? Well, because if the season were to end today, we'd all be out of work. But if the season were to end today,
does it end today? No.
if you're going on Tankathon, which is a widely accepted site keeping track of draft order for future seasons for not only football, but basketball, but hockey and baseball and things like that, and the WNBA, right now, the Raiders own the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft at 2-12. The Giants right behind him at 2-12 are number 2, followed by the Patriots and then the Jaguars. So Jacksonville is in the 4th spot. Jacksonville is one of 5 3-11 teams. But currently, Jacksonville is the 2nd worst of the 3-11 teams and are picking 4th. The number 1 overall pick will not be decided in this game, but it is interesting because everybody thinks that the Raiders want Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado quarterback, son of Deion, coached by his old man. Deion has actually said it out loud at an event in Vegas. He wants Antonio Pierce to coach his kid, and he wants his kid to go play quarterback for the Raiders. If the Raiders win this game with 2022 3rd-round pick of the Falcons, Desmond Ridder, beating 2021 Patriots 1st-round pick, Mac Jones, and the Raiders somehow fall out of pole position for the number 1 overall pick, and then the Giants potentially move up to number 1, or what if the Giants blow it and they beat Michael Penix in his first career start? What happens if the Patriots stun the Bills? Okay, they won't. But Bryce Young is playing well, and he's going to play the final 3 games of the year, and they play Arizona. That game's in Carolina. Nothing would shock me if Carolina won that. Down the stretch with teams jockeying for Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward potentially, because Garrett Nussmeier is going back to school. Don't know yet about Quinn Ewers, right? There is no true consensus number 1 quarterback. There are people, and there's a long way between now and the first night of the draft in Green Bay. There are plenty of people that will tell you that Cam Ward should be the number 1 guy, not Shedeur Sanders. But this game has 2 highly drafted for other teams backups battling when one of these teams, the Jaguars, just gave over $200 million to the former number 1 overall pick, who some aren't convinced is even the guy anymore. Have fun with that one.
I'd love to have fun with that. And you hit on exactly what I was tearing my hair out to say just seconds ago. That's the conversation, is if Jacksonville ends up with number 1. That's the fun conversation.
To jump over.
Yeah, it is. Look, their path is muddiest to number 1. That's true. We know New England, if New England ended up with 1, the idea that they would draft a quarterback with what we've seen from Drake May seems at this point not likely.
Unlikely, but you sell the pick off.
Of course. And again, what happened again? New England, Mac Jones looked good early. Remember, Mac Jones, that was a playoff team. Mac Jones led the Patriots to the playoffs. They got destroyed by the Bills in the wild card round, but that was a team that made the playoffs with Belichick and Mac Jones. So in other words, they've seen a nice season out of a young quarterback before to know that it wasn't exactly their future. So maybe Drake May has not convinced everyone in the building, but that seems most unlikely. Trevor Lawrence, would you draft another number 1 overall quarterback?
The guy. You can't.
Do you remember? You remember, obviously,
the new Kyler Murray hasn't even kicked in yet.
Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray. That's what happened, right? Arizona.
Josh Rosen,
he wasn't number 1
on a rookie contract,
and he wasn't number 1. He wasn't the first 10. Overall where Trevor is. Right.
Rookie contract, easily tradable.
Do you tie yourself to the money, or do you tie yourself to the opportunity?
The money's real, and it's a real anchor.
So is it then just a bargaining chip and you're saying we're all in with Trevor and then obviously they could trade it? I mean, it's not like you don't want the number 1 seed.
You have to. Like, it is such, we talk about for example, the Denver Broncos have $84 million on the dead cap this year. They drafted a rookie quarterback. They cut Russell Wilson. They made that move. They're severely limited financially. They drafted the right quarterback and they're well coached. And Vance Joseph has put together a great defense. And they have finds like Nick Bonito, guys like that playing great, and it's working. Obviously the Browns have an issue with Deshaun Watson's contract. What do? Don't know. Don't have an opinion, nor too much insight sitting here. But the Jaguars just handed out that contract over the summer. The new money, I bet you, hasn't even kicked in. The signing bonus certainly kicked in. It is as untradeable a deal without looking at it on paper, and maybe I'm wrong, but I know this at a bare minimum. It is prohibitive. You simply cannot do it. I don't think they're going to get the number 1.
I'd love to see. I think of all the places that Shedeur could end up, it does. Yes, the Raiders seems most fun. That just, yeah. I mean, New York's interesting. Although New York's offensive line is so bad.
But you don't know who's going to coach New York.
True, but New York's offensive line is so bad, and not that the Raiders is amazing.
If the Raiders is good.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not.
Okay.
It's not. But it's. I mean,
it's poor. Matter of fact, you want to go through the offensive lines for every one of the top 10? Vegas bad, Giants bad, Patriots horrible.
Yeah, awful.
Jaguars traded Cam Robinson, got a middling return. Panthers.
Panthers.
Titans.
I mean, Panthers have been able to run the ball. Panthers have been able to run the ball, but
the Titans have gone O-line in the first round each of the last 2 years. O-line's getting better.
Yeah.
Browns, when healthy, good O-line.
Yeah, for sure.
So Jets. It was better this year, but a lot of pieces that were on short-term veteran deals. Who knows what it looks like next year under whomever is leading. So
I'd like to, again, the most dramatic thing, the Jacksonville thing with Trevor there. Yeah, the idea that they would have both of those quarterbacks seems ridiculous, but teams have done wild things and decided they're all in. I just don't know that. I don't know. I would say the consensus on Shedeur and Cam being a can't miss prospect, that's not there. I don't think can't miss is used with either one of those two names.
Correct.
This was not the quarterback. This was not considered a quarterback rich draft class for 2025. So we're probably having more fun with it than it really is.
Get talked up between now and then.
But is it actually right?
Every year. I would argue that it's almost better if you're not drafting a quarterback to be 2 this year. But who knows? That remains to be seen. I just think it's fascinating, this one. And if the Jaguars somehow do get the number 1 overall pick, they will have the number 1 overall pick 3 out of 5 years. And in that window, they made the playoffs and won a playoff game. Think about that. If the Panthers get it, it will be 3 consecutive years in which they at least held the pick, which is also absurd. Either way, that's it for us. Sam, it's been fun. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah.
Yes,
Happy. To you and yours as well out there. Please be safe. Travel safely. Move swiftly through airports and get out of the way for everyone else. And hope this holiday season brings you joy, happiness, peace, health, merriment, and good stuff in your stocking, if that's what you do. For Sam, I'm Andrew. Like, subscribe, and share. We appreciate you listening and watching. This is Thinking Out Loud. So long, everybody.